I'll never forget the look on my brother's face when his future father-in-law stood up at that engagement dinner and asked me, "Wait, you're the Alex Chen? The documentary filmmaker?" The entire private dining room went silent. My brother Derek's smile froze. His fiancée Melissa looked confused. And I just sat there, wine glass halfway to my lips, wondering if I should save my brother from what was about to happen. Spoiler alert, I didn't. But to understand why that moment felt so good, I need to take you back 6 weeks earlier, to the phone call that started everything. I was in post-production on my latest documentary when Derek called. I almost didn't answer. We weren't close. Growing up, Derek was the golden child, the one who did everything right according to our parents. Medical school, prestigious residency, country club membership, the whole package. I was the disappointment, the one who chose film school over law school, who moved to New York instead of staying in our hometown, who made documentaries about climate refugees instead of joining Dad's legal practice. "Alex, big news!" Derek's voice was that particular brand of cheerful that immediately put me on edge. "Melissa and I are getting engaged. Well, officially engaged. Obviously, we've been planning it." "Congratulations," I said, saving my work file. "That's great, man." "So, Mom's planning an engagement dinner, the whole family, plus Melissa's parents. It's going to be at that new restaurant downtown, Veritas. You know, the one that got written up in the Times?" Of course he mentioned the Times review. Derek measured everything by how it looked to other people. "When is it?" 6 weeks from Saturday. Mark your calendar. Mom specifically said you have to come. No excuses about being in Cambodia or whatever this time. I'd been in Bangladesh, not Cambodia, documenting the textile industry's environmental impact. But Derek never bothered with details about my work. "I'll be there," I said. "Great. And Alex?" His tone shifted slightly. "Maybe dress nice? Like, actually nice. Melissa's parents are, well, they're important people. Her dad's some big deal in education or philanthropy or something. Just make a good impression, okay?" There it was, the implied criticism wrapped in concern. The suggestion that I, left to my own devices, would embarrass him. "I'll try not to show up in my documentary filmmaking rags," I said dryly. He laughed, missing the sarcasm entirely. "Perfect. See you then, little brother." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my editing timeline, at the faces of the people I'd interviewed, farmers losing their land to rising seas, families displaced by drought, children who'd never known a stable home. This work mattered. I knew it mattered. But my family had never understood it. To them, I was still the screw-up who'd abandoned a real career to chase some artistic pipe dream. The fact that I'd won awards, that my documentary streamed on major platforms, that I'd been profiled in industry publications, none of that registered with them. They didn't watch documentaries. They didn't move in circles where my work was known. To my family, I was a barely employed dreamer, still trying to figure things out at 32. The 6 weeks crawled by. I finished post-production on Rising Tides, the documentary about climate displacement in South Asia. My producer was already getting festival acceptance notifications. Sundance, Tribeca, Toronto. The response was better than we'd hoped. But when Mom called to check in about the dinner, she didn't ask about my work. "Derek's so excited for you to meet Melissa's family," she said. "Her father runs this incredible foundation. They fund educational programs all over the world. Very impressive people." "Sounds great, Mom." "I'm just saying, it would be nice if you could maybe talk about something other than your films for once. Show interest in other people's accomplishments." I counted to 5 silently. "I'll do my best." "And you'll dress appropriately?" Derek mentioned he was worried. "Mom, I'm 32 years old. I know how to dress for dinner." "I know, honey. It's just, this is important to your brother. Melissa comes from a very different kind of family, and first impressions matter." Different meaning wealthier, more connected, more prestigious. I understand, I said, because there was no point arguing. After we hung up, I texted my best friend Sarah, who'd known my family for years. Sarah. Oh God, the engagement dinner of judgment? Me. Yep, taking bets on how long before someone asks when I'm getting a real job. Sarah. I give it 15 minutes, 20 if they're being polite. Me. You're generous with your estimates. Sarah. Wear something devastatingly expensive. Make them question their assumptions. Me. I'm a documentary filmmaker, not a trust fund kid. Sarah. Fine. Wear something devastatingly cool. Remind them you live in New York and have a life outside their suburb. I sent her the eye roll emoji, but I appreciated the support. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I was walking into. Derek's relationships had always been transactional. He dated women who fit a specific profile, who could advance his career or social standing in some way. I'd met Melissa once, briefly, at a family Christmas. She seemed nice enough, polished, well-educated. The kind of person who used phrases like, "summer in the Hamptons," unself-consciously. But I didn't really know her. And I definitely didn't know her family. All I knew was that this dinner was important to Derek, and therefore important to my parents, and therefore a minefield I needed to navigate carefully. Veritas was exactly the kind of restaurant Derek would choose. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a wine list the size of a phone book. The hostess looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, all sharp angles and practiced smile. "Chen party?" I told her. "I think they're already here." She led me through the main dining room to a private space in the back, because of course, Derek had booked a private room. Can't have a family dinner without an audience and controlled environment. I heard my mother's laugh before I saw anyone. That particular trill she saved for impressing people. Then I stepped into the room. The table was set for 10. My parents were already seated, along with Derek, Melissa, and 3 people I didn't recognize, presumably Melissa's parents and maybe a sibling. Everyone was dressed like they were attending a board meeting. Suits, cocktail dresses, jewelry that probably cost more than my camera equipment. I'd worn dark jeans, a button-down shirt, and a blazer. Sarah's advice about looking devastatingly cool had translated into the most put-together version of my normal self. But I could see the micro-expression on my mother's face when she spotted me. The tiny tightening around, her eyes that meant she'd hoped for more. "Alex!" Derek stood up, all broad smiles and performance. "Everyone, my little brother's here." Little brother, as if the 3-year age gap was a decade. He pulled me into a hug that felt rehearsed, then turned me toward the table like a show-and-tell item. "This is Alex. Alex, this is Melissa's family, Robert and Patricia Thornton, and Melissa's sister Claire." Robert Thornton stood to shake my hand. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident bearing that comes from years of being listened to. Patricia was elegant, warm-smiled, clearly the diplomatic power behind whatever throne Robert occupied. Claire was younger than Melissa, maybe late 20s, and she gave me a genuinely friendly smile that I appreciated. "Nice to meet you all," I said, taking the empty seat between my father and Claire. "Alex just got back from Asia," my mother jumped in quickly, as if my presence needed explanation. "He makes little documentaries, films, about, what was it this time, honey? The environment?" Little documentaries. I saw Derek's mouth twitch with a suppressed smile. "Climate displacement in South Asia," I said evenly. "How rising sea levels are affecting coastal communities." "How fascinating," Patricia said, and she sounded sincere. "That must be such important work." "It has its moments." "And does that support you financially?" Robert asked. Direct, no nonsense. Documentary filmmaking seems like a challenging field economically. There it was. Less than 5 minutes in, and we'd arrived at the question of my viability as an adult. "I do okay," I said. "Festival circuits, streaming deals, the occasional grant. It's not medicine," I glanced at Derek. "But I make it work." Alex is still figuring things out, my mother added helpfully. It's an artistic pursuit, more of a passion project than a career. I felt my jaw tighten. Derek leaned back in his chair, radiating smug satisfaction. This was going exactly how he'd hoped. His little brother, the artistic flake, making the family look wholesome and grounded by contrast. Well, passion is important, Claire said diplomatically. What's the documentary about, specifically? I could have kissed her for asking. Before I could answer, Derek cut in. It's about people moving because of weather or something. Alex goes to these countries and films poor people talking about their problems. He said it with just enough condescension to make it sound naive and ineffective. That's not exactly accurate, I said carefully. Close enough though, right? Derek grinned. I mean, I support it. Someone has to care about that stuff. I just think it's admirable that you're still chasing the dream, you know? Even without the stability most people need. The first course arrived, some kind of artistic scallop situation that probably cost $40 a plate. The conversation flowed around me. Derek talked about his residency. Melissa shared wedding planning updates. Robert and my father bonded over golf handicaps. I was decorative, present but irrelevant. Patricia asked me polite questions about New York, which I appreciated. Claire seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking follow-ups that showed she was actually listening. But Derek was on a roll. The thing about Alex, he announced during the main course, is that he's always been the rebel. While I was studying for the MCATs, he was watching Sundance documentaries and talking about storytelling and social impact. He made air quotes. Mom and Dad were so patient with him. Patient. Like I'd been a troubled teenager instead of an adult making career choices. We just wanted him to have security, Mom said, playing her part. But Alex has always been independent. Independent, the family code word for difficult. I think it's brave, Claire said suddenly. Pursuing something you believe in even when it's hard. Even when people don't understand it. I glanced at her, surprised. Derek laughed. Brave is one word for it. I mean, I love my brother, but let's be real. How many people can actually make a living doing documentary film? It's like saying you're going to be a professional poet. Sweet idea, tough reality. Some people manage, I said quietly. Sure, the lucky ones. The ones with trust funds or family money backing them up. He gestured with his wine glass. But for normal people, you need something stable, something that actually pays the bills. I felt my face heat up. Because here's what Derek didn't know, what my family didn't know. I'd been supporting myself completely since film school. No family money, no trust fund. Just grants, freelance work, teaching gigs, and increasingly, actual income from my documentaries. My last film had been acquired by a streaming platform for enough money to fund my next 3 projects. I'd been a keynote speaker at a conference last month. I had a development deal in the works with a production company, but I'd never told my family any of this. Why? Because they'd never asked. They'd decided who I was years ago, and no amount of evidence was going to change their mental image of Alex, the struggling artist. Well, Robert said, breaking the tension. Different paths work for different people. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. I ended up in education instead. Disappointed him terribly at first. Education is at least a stable field, Derek said. A recognized profession. Derek, Melissa said softly, putting her hand on his arm, warning him. But Derek was enjoying himself too much to stop. I'm just saying, there's nothing wrong with what Alex does. It's admirable even. But he's 32 and still living like a grad student. Still borrowing money from Mom and Dad when projects don't work out. I have never borrowed money from Mom and Dad, I interrupted. The table went quiet. Derek blinked. What? I said I've never borrowed money from them. Not once. Not since I graduated. Well, not borrowed exactly, Mom jumped in. But we've helped here and there. When you were between projects. No, Mom, you haven't. I've never asked for money, and you've never given me any. I saw confusion cross her face. She genuinely believed she'd been supporting me. Derek had probably told her I was struggling, and she'd believed it without question. Okay, well, regardless, Derek pivoted. My point is that it's different when you have real responsibilities. When you're building a life with someone, planning a future, you need stability. You need a real career. And there it was. The implication clear. Derek had a real career. Derek was building a real life. Derek was the successful one. I was just the little brother playing make-believe with cameras. I should have let it go. That's what I'd always done before. Smile, nod. Let Derek have his moment of superiority. Keep the peace. But something about that night, maybe the wine, maybe the accumulation of years of dismissal, maybe Claire's kind defense of my choices, made me snap. You know what, Derek? I set down my fork. You're right. Documentary filmmaking isn't a stable career path. It's unpredictable. Projects fall through. Funding disappears. You work for months on something that might never see an audience. Derek nodded, vindicated. But it's also deeply fulfilling work that creates actual social impact. My last documentary, Vanishing Villages, was used by 3 NGOs to lobby for climate policy changes. It was screened at the UN. It changed actual policy. That's wonderful, Patricia started. I'm not finished, I said, and I heard the edge in my voice. And yes, it's hard to make money doing it, especially at first. But I'm not at first anymore. I'm established. I have 2 films in major festival circulation right now. I just signed a development deal worth more than Derek's residency salary. I saw my mother's eyes widen. But you never told us, she began. You never asked, Mom. None of you ever ask about my actual work. You just assume I'm struggling because that's the story you've decided to believe. Alex, I don't think this is the time, my father said. No, Dad, I think it's exactly the time. Because Derek just spent the last 20 minutes explaining to his future in-laws how I'm the family disappointment. The one who hasn't figured life out yet. The cautionary tale. I never said, Derek protested. You did. You've been saying it my whole life. Every Christmas when you ask if I'm still doing the film thing. Every family gathering when you introduce me as your little brother who chases documentaries. Every phone call where you hint that maybe I should consider something more stable. The private dining room felt very small suddenly. I think you're being overly sensitive, Derek said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Or are you? Uncomfortable because your narrative doesn't match reality? Melissa touched Derek's arm again. Maybe we should... No, it's fine, Derek said, but his face was flushed. Alex is right. He's a successful documentary filmmaker. I'm sorry I didn't recognize that properly. The words were right, but the tone was all wrong. Patronizing, dismissive. Derek, Robert said quietly. There was something in his voice that made everyone look at him. He was studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Alex Chen, he said slowly. Documentary filmmaker. Climate displacement in South Asia. He paused. Did you make Vanishing Villages? My heart stopped. Yes, I said. And before that, Silent Waters? About the Mekong Delta? Yes. Robert set down his wine glass very carefully. Patricia, he said to his wife, this is the filmmaker I told you about. The one whose work the foundation screened last month. The table had gone completely silent. I'm sorry, Melissa said, looking between her father and me. What's happening? Robert was still staring at me, and now there was something like wonder in his expression. The Thornton Foundation focuses on environmental education and climate policy advocacy, he explained. Last month, our board screened several documentaries as part of our annual review of current climate communication work. We were looking for projects to potentially fund or partner with. He turned to his wife. Do you remember? I came home and told you about that extraordinary film about the coastal villages in Bangladesh. How it was the most effective piece of climate communication I'd seen in years. Patricia's eyes widened. The one you wanted to show at the gala? That was Vanishing Villages, Robert said. He looked at me. You made that? I nodded, not trusting my voice. I had no idea. Robert shook his head. Derek, you didn't mention your brother was that Alex Chen. Derek's face had gone from flushed to pale. I didn't know there was that Alex Chen, he said weakly. Your work is remarkable, Robert continued, directing all his attention to me now. The way you humanize climate data, the intimacy of your interviews, the visual storytelling. It's exactly what we need more of in this space. We've been trying to contact your production company for weeks about a potential partnership. My producer mentioned some emails, I managed. I've been in post-production, so I haven't been checking as regularly. We want to fund your next project, Robert said simply. Whatever it is. We also want to screen your existing work at our foundation's events, use it in our educational programs, and potentially commission a series of shorter pieces for policy advocacy. The silence was deafening. I could feel my mother's shock, my father's confusion, Derek's complete paralysis. Claire was grinning openly. That's incredibly generous, I said. I'd love to discuss it. I cannot believe, Robert continued, shaking his head, that Derek's little brother is Alex Chen. I have been singing your praises to everyone on our board. The director of our climate initiative watched Silent Waters 3 times. We've been calling you a rising star in environmental documentary work. Rising star, Derek repeated faintly. I'm working on a new piece about climate refugees in East Africa, I heard myself say, still in shock. Following families over multiple years, showing the long-term human cost of displacement. Robert's eyes lit up. Exactly the kind of longitudinal storytelling we need. This is perfect. We should absolutely talk about funding. Patricia, we could feature this at next year's gala. Robert, Patricia interrupted gently, maybe we should let Alex enjoy his dinner first before we recruit him for every foundation project. But she was smiling at me warmly, and I could see the shift in how she viewed me. 30 seconds ago, I was the eccentric little brother with an unstable career. Now I was a filmmaker whose work her husband admired. The rest of the dinner was surreal. Robert wanted to know about my process, my inspirations, my upcoming projects. Patricia asked thoughtful questions about the ethical challenges of documentary work. Claire admitted she'd watched Silent Waters in a college environmental studies class. Even Melissa, who'd been quiet through most of the meal, brightened when she realized her father's foundation might partner with her future brother-in-law. My parents were speechless. They kept looking at me like I was a stranger. My mother, in particular, seemed to be recalculating every conversation we'd had for the past decade. Derek said almost nothing. He picked at his food, smiled tightly when people spoke to him. Occasionally tried to redirect conversation back to the wedding or his residency. But the energy had shifted. The family disappointment had become the person everyone wanted to talk to. I truly had no idea you'd made such a mark in the documentary world, Robert said over dessert. Derek, you must be so proud of your brother. Of course, Derek said automatically. Always have been. The lie hung in the air. Everyone at the table knew it was a lie. Derek had spent the entire evening diminishing my work, and now he had to pretend he'd been supportive all along. I'm curious, Claire said, and there was mischief in her voice. Derek, have you seen Alex's documentaries? Derek hesitated. I've been meaning to, my schedule at the hospital. They stream on several platforms, Claire continued innocently. One of them won an award at Sundance, right, Alex? 2 awards, I said quietly. Best Documentary Feature and the Audience Award. My mother made a small sound. You won Sundance Awards, she said. When? 3 years ago for Silent Waters, then last year for Vanishing Villages. You never told us, my father said, and for the first time he sounded hurt rather than disappointed. I did, Dad. I called you from Park City both times. You said congratulations and asked if there was prize money. I watched him remember. Watched the memory resurface of a phone call he'd barely paid attention to. His son calling excitedly about some film award. Him responding with polite disinterest before returning to his golf game. I didn't realize Sundance was. I didn't know that was significant, he said lamely. It's one of the most prestigious film festivals in the world, Robert said. And there was an edge to his voice now. Winning there is extraordinary. Having 2 films win is nearly unprecedented for someone Alex's age. The table fell quiet again. I felt something twist in my chest. A complicated mix of vindication and sadness. Because this was what it took for my family to see me. External validation from someone they considered important. Robert Thornton's approval mattered in a way my own accomplishments never had. I think, Melissa said carefully, breaking the silence, that we should propose a toast. To Derek and me, obviously, but also to Alex, for his remarkable work that apparently my whole family except me knew about. She shot her father a look that suggested they'd be having a conversation later about why he'd never mentioned any of this. Everyone raised their glasses. Derek's hand was shaking slightly. To Derek and Melissa, I said, because I could be gracious in victory. And to family. We drank. After dinner, while the parents and Melissa's family were saying their goodbyes in the restaurant lobby, Derek grabbed my arm. We need to talk, he said. He pulled me outside, into the cold night air. The street was quiet, just a few cars passing, the warm glow of the restaurant behind us. What the hell was that? Derek said, and his voice was shaking with anger. What was what? You blindsided me in there. You made me look like an idiot in front of my future in-laws. I stared at him. I didn't make you look like anything, Derek. You did that yourself. I was just joking around. The stuff about your career, that was just family banter. Everyone knows you have a weird artsy job. I wasn't actually trying to. Yes, you were, I interrupted. You were absolutely trying to make yourself look better by making me look worse. You do it every time we're together. That's not. Derek, you spent an hour telling the Thorntons that I'm an unstable dreamer who can't pay his bills. You said I borrow money from Mom and Dad. You implied my work is a hobby, not a career. You called my documentaries little projects about poor people's problems. He flinched. And the worst part? I continued. You believed it. You genuinely think you're more successful than me because you're a doctor and I make films. You've never once actually looked at what I do. Never watched a single documentary. Never asked about my work except to condescend to it. I've been busy. For 10 years? You've been too busy for 10 years to show the slightest interest in your brother's career? Derek's jaw worked. You don't understand. This dinner was important. Melissa's family, they're connected, they're influential. I needed them to see our family as successful, stable. Having you there talking about climate refugees and documentary funding, it doesn't exactly scream prestigious. But it turns out it does, I said softly. To Robert Thornton at least, the man whose approval you were desperately performing for all night. That's not fair. Isn't it? Be honest, Derek. When has anything I've done been good enough for you? What would I have had to accomplish for you to respect my work? He didn't answer. If I'd gotten into medical school like you wanted, would that have been enough? If I'd joined Dad's firm? If I'd married someone from the right family and joined the right clubs and lived in the right neighborhood? This isn't about. It's exactly about that. You measure success by how it looks to other people, And I don't fit the picture you want to present. I never have. The door to the restaurant opened and Melissa stepped out. Everything okay? She asked carefully. Fine, Derek said quickly, just catching up. She looked between us, clearly not buying it. The parents are heading out. We should say goodbye. Derek nodded and started toward the door. Derek, I called. He turned back. Congratulations on the engagement. I really mean that. Melissa seems great. I hope you'll be happy. He studied my face, looking for sarcasm, found none. Thanks, he said finally. And Alex, your documentaries, they really are good? Yes, I said, they really are. He nodded slowly and went inside. Melissa lingered. My father won't stop talking about you, she said. Fair warning, you're going to get recruited hard for foundation projects. I gathered. He really does love your work. He made the whole board watch Vanishing Villages twice, took notes, the whole thing. That's actually really flattering. She smiled, then turned serious. Derek's not used to being upstaged. I wasn't trying to. I know, but it happened anyway. He'll get over it. Eventually, she paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad I know what you actually do now. Derek's always been weird about you, defensive, dismissive. I assumed it was just sibling rivalry, but watching tonight... She shook her head. I think it's more than that. Yeah, I said, I think so too. She went inside, leaving me alone on the street. I pulled out my phone. Several texts from Sarah demanding updates. An email from my producer about festival selections. A notification from Robert Thornton's assistant requesting a meeting next week. And a text from my mother. We need to talk, tomorrow? I stared at that one for a long moment before pocketing my phone. I met my mother for coffee the next day. She was already at the cafe when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, hands wrapped around a cup like she needed the warmth. Hi, Mom, I said, sliding in across from her. Your father wanted to come, she said immediately. I told him this should be just us first. Okay. She looked at me, really looked at me, in a way she hadn't in years. I didn't know, she said finally. About the awards, about the foundation interest, about any of it. I told you. No, I mean, I didn't know it mattered. I didn't know it was real. She stopped, frustrated with herself. That sounds terrible. It sounds honest. She took a breath. When you decided not to go to law school, your father and I were devastated. We'd had this picture of your life, you and Derek, both professionals, both settled and secure, and you just rejected all of it. I chose a different path. We thought you were making a mistake. We thought you'd regret it, struggle, eventually come back to something more stable. So every time you called about a project or a screening or an award, we heard it as you still being stuck in this phase we were waiting for you to grow out of. I didn't say anything. And Derek, she shook her head. Derek has always been insecure about you. That surprised me. What? You were always the creative one, the one who had passion for what you did. Derek chose medicine because it's what we wanted, what looked good. But I don't think he's ever loved it the way you love filmmaking. He sees you doing what you care about, making it work against the odds, and it threatens him. So he tears me down to feel better about himself. Yes, she said simply. And we let him. We participated in it, because if you were the struggling artist, then Derek was the successful son. And that felt safer, more understandable. She reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. I'm sorry, Alex. I'm sorry we didn't see you. I'm sorry we didn't ask. I'm sorry we let our fears and our assumptions keep us from being proud of you. My throat felt tight. Last night, she continued, watching Robert Thornton talk about your work with such respect, such genuine admiration, I realized we've been doing that wrong. We've been measuring your success by our metrics instead of actually seeing what you've built. I never needed you to understand the film industry, I said quietly. I just needed you to trust that I knew what I was doing, that I could make my own choices about my life. I know, we were wrong. We were so focused on protecting you from potential failure that we couldn't see your actual success. A barista called out an order. The espresso machine hissed. Normal cafe sounds in the middle of an abnormal conversation. What happens now? I asked. I'd like to watch your documentaries, Mom said. If you'd let me. All of them. I want to understand what you do, why it matters to you, who you are as an artist. They're pretty heavy, I warned. Climate, displacement, environmental destruction, refugee crises. Not exactly light viewing. Good, she said firmly. I want to see the world the way you see it. I want to understand what drives you to tell these stories. I felt something crack open in my chest, something that had been locked tight for years. I'd like that, I said. And your father wants to talk to you too. He's ashamed of himself, though he hasn't said it in those words. You know how he is. Yeah. Derek. She hesitated. Derek is struggling with this. What happened last night? He's embarrassed, defensive. He's been the golden child for so long. He doesn't know how to not be the center of positive attention. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. I know, but it happened anyway. And maybe it needed to happen. Maybe we all needed to have our assumptions challenged. She finally touched my hand. I'm proud of you, Alex. I should have said that years ago. I should have said it every time you called with good news. But I'm saying it now, and I mean it. I'm proud of who you've become and what you've accomplished. I had to look away because my eyes were burning. Thanks, Mom, I managed. We sat there for a while, drinking coffee, not needing to fill the silence with words. Derek called 3 days later. Can we meet? He asked. No preamble, just you and me. We agreed on a park near his apartment, neutral territory. It was cold, the kind of sharp autumn cold that meant winter wasn't far off. Derek was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench, hands shoved in his coat pockets. Hey, I said, sitting down. Hey. We watched a kid on a scooter zoom past, his mother jogging behind him. Melissa's been giving me hell, Derek said finally. About how I treated you at the dinner. She seems like a good person. She is. Too good for me, probably, he exhaled sharply. She made me watch your documentaries, all of them. We had a marathon weekend. I waited. They're incredible, Alex. I mean, I don't know anything about filmmaking, but even I could tell there's something special. The way you tell those stories, the way you make you care about people you'll never meet. He shook his head. I had no idea. I tried to tell you. I know. I didn't listen. I didn't want to listen. He turned to face me. Do you know why? Mom said you've always been insecure about me. He laughed bitterly. Did she? Well, she's not wrong. You want to know the truth. I've been jealous of you since we were kids. That shocked me. What? Derek, you were the golden child. You got all the praise, all the attention. Because I did what they wanted. But you? You did what you wanted. You had the guts to disappoint them, to risk their approval, to chase what mattered to you. I've never had that courage. He stared at his hands. I became a doctor because it's what Dad wanted. I joined his country club, dated the right women, said the right things at the right parties. I built a life that looks perfect on paper. But I've never felt passionate about any of it. Not like you feel about your work. Derek. Let me finish, please. He took a breath. Watching you at that dinner, watching you talk about your documentaries with Robert Thornton, seeing how much you genuinely care about climate refugees and environmental justice, I realized you have something I've never had. Purpose. Real, genuine purpose. Medicine is purposeful. For some people, yeah. for people who love it. But I don't love it, Alex. I'm good at it, I'm competent, I help people. But it's just a job to me. A prestigious, well-paying job that makes our parents proud. But it's not a calling. A jogger passed us, a dog barked in the distance. I tore you down, Derek continued, because it was easier than admitting that you'd found something I hadn't. Easier than facing the fact that my little brother, the family disappointment, was actually braver and more fulfilled than I was. I'm not braver, I said quietly. I'm just stubborn. He smiled slightly. Maybe, but you're also talented, passionate, and making a real difference in the world. And I've been too threatened by that to acknowledge it. So what now? Now I apologize. Sincerely, genuinely apologize for years of being a condescending asshole, for dismissing your work, for never supporting you the way a brother should, for actively undermining you to make myself feel better. Derek, I'm not asking you to forgive me immediately. I don't deserve that. But I want to try to do better. I want to actually be your brother instead of your competitor. I studied his face. He looked exhausted, stripped of the usual bravado. Okay, I said. Okay? Yeah, okay, let's try. He let out a breath he'd been holding. Thank you. But Derek, I need you to actually follow through. Don't just apologize and then go back to the same patterns. If you want to be my brother, be my brother. Ask about my work. Watch my films. Show up for me the way you want me to show up for you. I will, I promise. He paused. And Alex, the foundation thing with Robert Thornton? That's huge. Really huge. Don't let our family mess make you hesitate to pursue it. I won't. Good. He stood up. I should get back. Melissa and I are supposed to look at venues this afternoon. Wedding planning waits for no man. Good luck with that. He started to walk away, then turned back. I am proud of you, you know. I've just been too messed up to say it. But your work, it matters. You matter. My throat tightened. Thanks, Derek. He nodded and walked away, hands in his pockets, shoulders a little less tight than when he'd arrived. The Thornton Foundation offices were in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, all glass and exposed beams and walls covered with photographs from around the world. Robert Thornton met me in the lobby personally. Alex, thanks for coming. He shook my hand warmly. Come on up. I want you to meet our team. The conference room was filled with people I recognized from my research: climate scientists, policy advocates, education specialists. People whose work I'd referenced in my documentaries. Everyone, Robert announced. This is Alex Chen, the filmmaker I've been raving about. I spent the next 2 hours in the most surreal professional meeting of my life. They'd created a presentation about my work, had charts showing the social media reach of my documentaries, quotes from policymakers who'd cited my films, statistics about classroom screenings. They'd done more research on my impact than I had. What we're proposing, Robert explained, is a multi-year partnership. We fund your documentary work, full funding, creative control stays with you. In exchange, we get to use your films in our educational programs and advocacy campaigns. We're also interested in commissioning shorter pieces, added their director of communications. 3 to 5-minute segments we can use for social media, congressional briefings, corporate presentations. Climate communication that's emotionally compelling, but also shareable. And, Robert added, we want to establish a documentary fellowship in your name. Fund emerging filmmakers to tell climate stories the way you do. Human-centered, emotionally honest, visually compelling. I stared at them. A fellowship in my name. You're 32 and you've already changed how people talk about climate displacement. Imagine what you could do with proper funding and support. Imagine the filmmakers you could mentor. I couldn't find words. This is extraordinary. You're extraordinary, Robert said simply. Your work deserves this kind of support, so what do you say? Yes, I said, because what else could I say? Absolutely, yes. The room erupted in applause. 2 months later, my parents hosted a family dinner. Just immediate family this time, no future in-laws, no performances, just us. I arrived to find Derek already there, helping Mom in the kitchen. He looked up when I entered. "Hey, little brother," he said. But this time it sounded affectionate instead of condescending. "Hey." Mom hugged me tightly. "I finished Silent Waters last night," she said. "Alex, it made me cry. That family in the Mekong Delta, watching their village disappear. I couldn't stop thinking about it." "That's the point," I said. "To make people care about things that feel distant." "Well, it worked." She squeezed my arm. "Your father's in the living room. Be gentle with him. He's been practicing his apology." I found Dad sitting in his usual chair, looking uncomfortable. "Alex," he said, standing up. "Sit down, please." I sat. "I've been thinking," he began, then stopped. Started again. "I've been thinking about when you were 12 and you made that video about the park cleanup. You remember that?" "Yeah, for my school project. You made your mother and me watch it 3 times. You were so excited about every shot, every edit. You explained the whole thing, how you'd planned it, what story you were trying to tell." I'd forgotten about that video. My first documentary, made with a borrowed camcorder and enthusiasm I didn't know how to contain. "I thought it was cute," Dad continued. "A kid's hobby. But you were already a filmmaker then, weren't you? Already thinking about how to tell stories that mattered." "I guess so." "I dismissed it. Dismissed you. Thought you'd grow out of it, find something practical." He met my eyes. "I was wrong. You didn't grow out of it, you grew into it. You became exactly what you were meant to be. And I'm sorry I couldn't see that sooner." "Dad." "Let me finish." He cleared his throat. "I watched your Sundance acceptance speech, both of them. They're on YouTube. You thanked your crew, your subjects, other filmmakers who inspired you. You didn't thank your family." "You shouldn't have. We didn't support this. We didn't earn a place in that moment. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you now. Not just proud, I'm in awe of what you've built. And I'm sorry it took a stranger's admiration for me to see my own son clearly. My vision blurred." "Thanks, Dad," I managed. He stood up and hugged me, awkward and tight and genuine. Mom called us to dinner. We sat around the table, the 4 of us, and for the first time in years, it felt like a family. Derek asked about the foundation partnership. Dad wanted to know about the fellowship. Mom had questions about my next project. They asked, they listened, they cared. Derek and Melissa's official engagement party was 6 weeks later. This time, I knew what to expect. The Thorntons were there, along with dozens of other guests from Derek and Melissa's world. But I wasn't decorative anymore. I wasn't the awkward little brother hiding in the corner. Robert introduced me to his foundation's entire board. Patricia wanted to discuss screening my next documentary at their annual gala. Claire brought a friend who was a producer and wanted to talk about a collaborative project. I spent the evening having the kind of professional conversations I usually had at film festivals, not family events. At one point, I found myself alone with Melissa on the terrace, glasses of champagne in hand, watching the city lights. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For being exactly who you are. For not backing down at that first dinner," she smiled. Derek needed that wake-up call. We both did. "I wasn't trying to." "I know, that's what made it effective." She sipped her champagne. "He's different now, more honest, less performative. He's even talking about switching to a different specialty, one he actually cares about rather than one that looks prestigious." "Really?" "Emergency medicine, trauma work. Says he wants to help people in crisis, make a real difference. It's like watching him wake up from a long sleep." "That's great, Melissa." "It's because of you. Because you showed him it was possible to choose purpose over prestige. To be brave enough to disappoint people's expectations. The terrace door opened, and Derek stepped out. "There you are," he said to Melissa. Then to me, "Mom wants a family photo, all of us." We went inside. Found our parents waiting with a photographer. "Okay, boys," Mom said, arranging us. "Derek, Alex, stand together. Let me see my sons." Derek put his arm around my shoulders. Not performatively. Not for show. Just a brother's arm around his brother. The camera flashed. 3 years later, I'm sitting in a theater at the Tribeca Film Festival, watching my latest documentary premiere. Breaking Grounds follows 3 refugee families over 5 years, documenting their displacement, their journey, their resettlement struggles, and their eventual rebuilding. It's the most ambitious project I've ever attempted, funded entirely by the Thornton Foundation. The theater is packed. I can see Robert and Patricia Thornton in the 3rd row. My parents are directly behind them. Derek and Melissa, married now, expecting their first child, are to my left. Sarah is to my right, squeezing my hand as the credits roll. The lights come up. The applause is thunderous. The moderator calls me to the stage for the Q&A. "Alex Chen, everyone!" I stand up, and as I do, I see my family standing with the audience, clapping. Derek is on his feet, grinning, clapping harder than anyone. My mother has tears on her face. Dad gives me a thumbs up. I climb the stairs to the stage, microphone in hand, and look out at the sea of faces. These are my people. Documentarians, film lovers, people who care about stories and truth, and making the world slightly better through art. "Thank you all for being here," I start. The Q&A lasts 40 minutes. People ask about my process, my relationship with my subjects, the ethics of long-term documentary work, the technical challenges of shooting across multiple countries. Someone asks, "What made you decide to become a documentary filmmaker?" I pause, thinking about 12-year-old me with a borrowed camcorder, about choosing film school over law school, about every time someone told me to be more practical, more realistic, more like Derek. I became a documentary filmmaker, I say, because I believe stories change minds. Because I believe showing one person's truth can make thousands of people care about an issue they'd never considered before. And because I was stubborn enough to keep doing it, even when people told me it wasn't a real career. The audience laughs. But also, I continue, because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. This work, telling stories about people most of the world ignores, giving voice to the displaced and the forgotten, this is my purpose. It took me a while to be brave enough to claim that, to stop apologizing for choosing meaning over money, passion over prestige. I glance at my family, and it took some people in my life a while to understand it. But they got there eventually. We got there eventually. After the Q&A, there's a reception. I'm surrounded by industry people, potential collaborators, festival programmers. But I keep looking over at my family, standing in a cluster by the bar. Eventually, I excuse myself and join them. "That was incredible, sweetheart," Mom says, hugging me. "Those family stories. I can't stop thinking about them." "You've really found your voice," Dad adds. "This one was your best yet." Derek pulls me aside. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "Watching you up there, talking about your work with such passion, such certainty, I realize something." He pauses. "I want that. The feeling of doing exactly what you're meant to do. I'm still figuring out what that is for me, but I want to find it." "You will," I say. "It's never too late." "I'm switching to emergency medicine," he tells me, "starting a new residency next year. It'll mean more years of training, less money, less prestige. But I think I'll actually love it." "That's great, Derek." "Yeah," he smiles. "It is. And Alex, I know I've said this before, but I'm proud of you. Genuinely, sincerely proud. You were right all along, and I was an idiot for not seeing it. You weren't an idiot, you were just lost. Well, I'm finding my way now, thanks to you. Melissa joins us, her hand on her small baby bump. Your future niece or nephew is going to grow up watching your documentaries, she says. We're going to make sure they understand that success means doing what matters to you, not what looks good to other people. I feel my throat tighten with emotion. Robert Thornton appears, champagne glass in hand. Alex, magnificent work. The board wants to discuss expanding the fellowship program. We've had over 200 applications from aspiring documentary filmmakers. Your influence is growing. I'd love to discuss it, I say. I look around at this group, my family, my collaborators, my supporters. People who see me for who I am, who value the work I do, who understand why it matters. It took almost losing them to find them. It took standing up for myself at that engagement dinner to shift the dynamic. It took refusing to shrink myself to make Derek feel bigger. Later that night, I'm alone in my apartment, looking at the festival program with my name and photo in it. I think about that dinner 3 years ago, about Derek's dismissive comments, about my moment of decision, to either swallow the humiliation like always, or to finally speak my truth. I think about Robert Thornton's recognition, about the shock on Derek's face, about the slow, painful recalibration of my entire family's understanding of who I am. And I realize that moment wasn't really about Derek at all. It was about me. About finally believing my work was valuable enough to defend, about refusing to participate in my own diminishment. Derek would have kept dismissing me forever if I'd let him. My parents would have kept seeing me as the struggling artist if I'd accepted that narrative. But I didn't. I stood up. I spoke up. I claimed my worth even when it made people uncomfortable. And everything changed. Not immediately, not perfectly, but fundamentally. My phone buzzes. A text from Sarah. You did it. That film is going to change lives. So proud of you. I text back. Thanks for always believing in me, even when my family didn't. Her response is immediate. They believe now. That's what matters. I set down my phone and look out my window at the New York skyline. She's right. They believe now. But more importantly, I believe in myself. And that's the real victory.